play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
He's dying for a moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhardt of Hoops. This is your late week, pre-weekend pod, heading into the final regular season week of the Big Ten season, then off to postseason, assuming we're able to attend. And Dylan, how you doing, man?
I am good. Big weekend coming up. You got to show a little energy here.
You're always commenting on my energy. I do what I can.
We got to get you revved up.
I'm a bit of a curmudgeon. Sometimes it's hard to, just spice it up. This is why the morning pods are the hardest.
Yeah, it's a struggle. Got to get you going. It's
not all of us.
Not
all of us were watching last night's game from the comfort of the couch, my man.
Ouch.
Some people had to go and put in some real work. Okay.
Now you're getting feisty. A lot of hostility.
So before we hop into, we're going to really kind of take a long look at this weekend and the Big Ten race as a whole. But before we get into that, Dylan, what is cooking over at Hoops, and why should people subscribe to the wonderful work that you do over there?
We are in the midst of getting into the best time of year where get to preview a lot of games in not a lot of time. Postseason is really, I think, where we shine sometimes because there's so much to break down when you get the NCAA tournament matchups coming out. So we'll have all that. Also, anything you need to read about last night's Nebraska game. More likely you can come back later today and read about Sunday's Maryland game, which will be a little more interesting. How about over at The Athletic?
Oh, hold on. It should be noted, like I've always thought you do great stuff on those tournament turnarounds in terms of having like pretty in-depth previews that are ready to go, like as these matchups are popping up. And it's always been interesting to be with you when there's the possibility of multiple opponents on the next day, and you will pre-write previews for potentially both, and you're usually cheering for the team whose preview you like better.
Yes, this is a tough spot.
It's always very fun to watch, from my end at least. So over on The Athletic, I was at last night's game, obviously, and wrote, I don't know if you would call it an essay, I don't know if you'd call it a column or what, but I'm just sitting perched up in the stands and looking around, and you've got Juwan Howard coaching against Fred Hoiberg in a Michigan-Nebraska game, while John Beilein is up in a club box seat, and Jim Harbaugh sitting on the sideline, a seat over from Phil Martelli, and across the court you have Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman sitting not too far from Ray Jackson. Up on the big screen, they say, hey, by the way, Duncan Robinson scored 27 points last night, and Karis LeVert scored 51 points last night. It was just kind of this just bizarre, like, what is even going on here anymore? And I wrote about that. So
this is what you write when it's a Nebraska home game in March.
Yes, that would have been I can't imagine really giving too much of a shit about any of that stuff if it were, say, Michigan State, but alas, it was not. So got to get creative sometimes. Before that, I wrote about kind of the evolution of Xavier Simpson and John Teskey's relationship, two polar opposites. And then earlier this week on a trip to Penn State, wrote about Xavier Tillman and just kind of how much he is used as a kind of barometer for everyone else at Michigan State. So check all that out. Much more to come this weekend. I will be in East Lansing for Michigan State, Ohio State, and a potential share of the Big Ten championship or outright.
Potential outright
championship. Dylan may or may not be in Maryland for Michigan, Maryland. That's a whole other story, but yeah, lots more to come. So subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to Hoops, support this podcast through March. leave us a review if you'd be so kind in the iTunes store. And with that, big weekend, Dylan. You excited?
I am. We got back-to-back weekends with a trophy on the line. That's what we want, right?
Not bad. We are going to start with Michigan State. Obviously, a lot on the line for the Spartans. Home game against Ohio State. I think you could make a very real case. These are probably the two hottest teams in the Big Ten. You maybe throw
2 of the 3. I would throw Wisconsin in there.
Wisconsin, right? It was Illinois until last night's loss. Would have been in that conversation. But yeah, I agree. Wisconsin right up there. So playing for a share. And after everything that has come this year, and at one point 8-5 in the Big Ten, at one point 9-6 in the Big Ten, to be in this spot is both a testament to them, a testament to what's been a very strange season in the league, and probably that Michigan State has really been one of the best teams all along.
It reminds me of you just lose sight of the big picture over the course of like the week by week kind of updates, right? So in the first week of February, you're convinced Michigan State's like just broken, disastrous team because they lost a couple games by a couple possessions, and then everything's broken. But in the end, you end up exactly where you thought you'd be, with Michigan State in position to win the Big Ten. I mean, maybe you can say, well, we talked about this before the year, and Michigan State was supposed to win the league by 2, 3, 4 games. Like, we had that conversation. So I guess that also tells you, well, they have a margin for error, right? I mean, they definitely blew those 2 or 3 games along the way. So they got rid of their cushion as they went. But again, this is the best team in the Big Ten. They're outscoring Big Ten opponents by about twice as many points per possession as anyone else in the league. That's a pretty good tell that Michigan State's the team you want to back. And I think it also speaks to the fact that Michigan State when Michigan State lost to Wisconsin, Penn State, those teams were kind of on the upswing at that point. They were playing as well as they played all year. Iowa, Maryland, Penn State are kind of on the downswing now. So Michigan State got its revenge when those teams weren't necessarily playing as well, and put together its best stretch of the season, really, you could say, right? I mean, I don't know that there's anything that tops these last 3 wins in terms of consistent quality wins. So peaking at the right time. Tough spot coming up, though, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree that it's this is probably their best stretch of play. Obviously, I think there's just been signs of encouragement all over the place. You could sit here and just rattle them off, from Rocket Watts to what Xavier Tillman's been doing defensively, to Aaron Henry seeming to kind of find a steady level of play, to Malik Hall at least probably giving them a consistent starter at the 4 position, which as of 2 weeks ago still seemed like this just constant variable from game to game. Most encouraging. And I know Penn State isn't a team that is really one to, I don't think so, at least. Let me double check before I say this. To an extent, they're not one that really overly turns you over too much.
I would say they do.
It's 17%, so they're 4th in the league. So yeah, sure. And Penn State and Michigan State played one of its better games in terms of not turning the ball over.
I have a hot take.
Okay.
Turnovers are not what you should measure for Michigan State's success.
I wouldn't agree with that entirely.
Michigan State wins when it turns it over all the time. You disagree with that?
It can win when it turns the ball over. It also definitely loses when its losses also come with a pretty consistent thing you can point to, and there's turnovers.
Michigan State can turn the ball over enough that
I want you to go tell Izzo and Fife and Garland and Stevens what you just told me, and watch that reaction. I'll write a story about that too.
Here's what I'm trying to say. Michigan State can turn the ball over enough to lose a game.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State also can turn the ball over a lot more than an average team and still win. Right? If you had to tell me one stat that was going to make or break Michigan State in the NCAA tournament, I would say Michigan State can make the Final Four, turn the ball over on 20% of its possessions every game, right? Like, it comes down to a lot of other things for me as far as how Michigan State is going to play. I like the way Michigan State plays, turnovers are always going to be there. I think that's inevitable, so to speak. You disagree? That's
yeah,
fine.
I mean, I just think it just creates such a slim margin of error for you when you turn the ball over like that. Like one of the reasons Michigan State got away with shooting 5 for 19 on threes on the road was because they didn't really turn the ball over.
It's because they shot 66% on twos.
But still,
Okay.
5 for 19, and they shot, and part of that, the 2-point shooting percentage goes from offensive rebounds, and like there's everything has a cause and effect and things like that. But the cause and effect of turnovers, I think, is what leads to games losing a game that you should otherwise win, and that's really what the NCAA tournament comes down to sometimes.
Can we talk about Xavier Tillman?
Absolutely.
Because you can talk about all this other nonsense.
Absolutely.
Xavier Tillman is dominating games on both ends of the court.
Mm-hmm.
He shut down Lamar Stevens, shut down Jalen Smith, shut down Luka Garza.
So just to recap, that's the best low post scorer in the country, the best stretch 5 in the Big Ten, and a downhill guy who can face you up or play with his back to the basket at the 4 position. Those are those 3. They're completely different players, and he pretty much locked them all up. Unbelievable. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Should Xavier Tillman be a first team All Big Ten player?
Yes, I'm voting him first team All Big Ten. Now, my contemporaries? I don't think so. I don't think he'll be first team All Big Ten, but I think it's a no-brainer at this point. The last 2 weeks I was kind of leaning that way. I was just going to put him on second team just because that's like, okay, put him on second team. But the last 2 weeks and then making this run toward a possible at least share of the championship, I think I'm going him on first team and Cassius on the second team. What do you think?
He has 8 Ken Pom MVPs in 19 Big Ten games.
Wow.
I've said all along that he's Michigan State's most important player,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that is driven by the fact that anyone who plays either the 4 or 5 other than him is kind of a mess. But the way that he can dominate a game, and it's not just his scoring, because like a lot of that does come with derivative off of like ball screens and whatever else. And he's not a guy you post up all the time. His defense just completely changes this Michigan State team. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
You just need him on the court, and he's shut down guys that are just like really good players, and he can do it basically on an island by himself. I think.
Right. And that to me is the big part right
Remember when everyone lost their mind a month ago because he missed like 5 layups against Wisconsin? Like, people just need, like, shit happens during a basketball season. You're going to miss shots. You're going to lose games. This guy's just been so good, and I don't understand why he's not regarded more as a draftable prospect. I guess it's probably because he doesn't shoot. But man,
so here's a story.
Changes
on
everything.
That. So here's a story on that. Pre-game at Penn State, I'm talking to a friend of mine who is a NBA scout who was at the game. I won't name names, but we were talking with another reporter, and he was like, when I booked this trip like a month or so ago, I thought I was going to be seeing, a lot of guys who were, possible draftable guys from Stevens and Cassius, and I just don't know right now, like, who of these guys are actually we're going to be looking at like this spring. And I'm like, I'm like, what about Xavier Tillman? He's like, you think like Tillman? Really? And goes off, and I'm like, I don't know. I just started talking about Xavier. If I ever get fired from the Athletic, I could go be his agent based on what I just told this guy. But I mean, I just obviously raved about him the way we would on this show, and the guy's like nodding along. He's like, "Oh man, all right, well that's interesting." And then midway through the second half of that game, he just texts me and just goes, "Oh, you might be onto something with Tillman." So there's something about him. Like, I find that ridiculous. You find that ridiculous. We also watch him every game, but like there is something about him that has not translated to national attention or national hype. And maybe it's because he's teammates with Cassius Winston, who has been such a huge deal for a while now. Maybe it's just the fact that his offensive numbers aren't crazy. But there's no doubt that Xavier Tillman is going to be a guy who plays many years in the NBA and probably helps teams win games because he does things that win basketball games.
Yeah, here's how I would put it. If you just looked at Xavier Tillman's synergy page or his KenPom page or his highlight reel, you wouldn't be impressed with him. You would just say, whatever, he's a guy, he catch and finish big, he whatever, right?
Yeah.
Nothing really jumps off the page that way. If you sit down and watch 40 minutes of Michigan State playing a game that matters, I don't know how you can watch that and not say he's the best player on the court, right? I don't care who the other team is. So I think that a lot of times when you evaluate the NBA, you look for those flashes or like you're looking for those next level moments more than you're always looking for like a quality player who gives you great 38 minutes a game, right? Aaron Henry is sort of the opposite. Aaron Henry has some of those flashes, and you're like, well, look, he looks like he could do this, this, and that.
Right.
Xavier Tillman just wins games, and it's more maybe boring, and it's harder to notice in a Excel spreadsheet or just looking through. Like nothing jumps off the page to like make him wow you. But man, he changes everything, and I still don't know if there's a better top two combination in college basketball this season, right? Like that's Michigan State's ceiling. You have Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman. You don't need much else.
Yeah, I agree. And like it might be the NCAA tournament where Michigan State can run into a team and that Xavier finds himself in the marquee matchup, right? So Michigan State Dayton and they just stick him on Obi Toppin, or Michigan State versus Kansas and he has to deal with Azubuike or something, like something like that, where everyone watches the game and is like, oh shit, Tillman is awesome, and then suddenly he's projected as the 15th pick in the draft and something, it just happens like that. So maybe that's the case, maybe not, but the point remains he is so massively important to everything that happened. Like he leaves the court and shit goes sideways immediately at this point.
Yeah, and I do think it's a situation where he could like the example you said there is great, where he shut down Obi, who's more of like a kind of a stretch four guy that you have to guard out on the perimeter more, and then Azubuike the next game, who's a legit big inside post, and then be like, holy shit, who is this dude?
Right.
Like it's just something. I mean, NBA scouts aren't watching every Big Ten game; they're just kind of following it from afar, right? And that's the honest truth. And I don't know, he's playing. I mean, he's had a great season. He's playing as well as I think he's played all season over these last few games, too. So that's what you want to get at this point in the season, without a doubt.
And he clearly was kind of, he was in his own head a little bit offensively for a window there. Like there was a time that he was kind of struggling to finish and whatever. You're right. It happens. And but right now I think is the opposite. Right now I think his offense is as confident as he's been. Like he's just catching and finishing. It's all on instinct. I thought he was really good against Penn State, obviously. All the pieces are together. But the concern for Michigan State is who's going to be the smart coach in the Big Ten or in the NCAA tournament that decides our number one priority in this game is getting 2 fouls on Xavier Tillman in the first 8 minutes, no matter what. Because that's the special sauce right there. That's the recipe. You get him off the court and things come undone so quickly. It is pretty jarring at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely that's what happened in the first half against Iowa. That is the secret sauce. It's hard to do.
And if they weren't playing that ridiculous Iowa team at home, they would have maybe lost the game.
But Iowa is also a team that is well equipped to do that, right? It's easier said than done to just go and get 2 fouls on him.
And they were bad calls. There was the one call was 70 feet from the basket on the sideline but go ahead.
To his credit, he's done a good job of staying out of foul trouble. His fouls per 40 are down from 4.7 last year to 3.2 this year. 3.2 is a really good number for a big dude who plays basically every minute. So he does a good job of staying out of foul trouble while still being one of the best defenders, which is credit to him. I don't know. He makes everything work on that team, and if he's off the floor, that's like if you're looking at ways a team loses, 2 early fouls and then an early third foul in the second half is a way Michigan State gets upset at some point.
Yep.
But I don't know that you can look at it like, oh, he's gonna pick up 2 fouls, right? He doesn't.
Oh, sure.
He rarely picks up fouls that you think he shouldn't. You know what I mean?
No doubt. Let's get into Ohio State. So Ohio State on Sunday, Cassius Winston, senior day as well for Kyle Arns and Joshua Langford. You would probably be better at explaining in a digestible form exactly what the scenarios are in place for shares and outright championships. Can you go through that for the people?
I can attempt to do that.
Okay.
For the people.
Thank you.
3 teams in the mix: Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin. Any of those teams win, they get at least a share of the Big Ten. If the other 2 teams lose, a team would win outright. So Michigan State hosts Ohio State, Maryland hosts Michigan, and Wisconsin goes to Indiana. That's essentially the situation. And if Michigan State and Wisconsin both win, I believe Wisconsin has most of the tiebreakers and would be the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament.
That's my understanding as well.
There could be some other weird scenarios, but
yeah,
that's what we're looking at. As brief as possible.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's very clear for Michigan State, right? As long as you take care of business, you get a share of a Big Ten championship.
Yep.
So,
and Michigan State will be the last team to play, so there's a chance that they could know they're playing for an outright Big Ten championship too.
Good point. Wisconsin, Indiana is what, noon Saturday?
And Michigan is at Maryland is noon on Sunday.
And then Michigan State, Ohio State tips at 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Is that the last Big Ten game of the regular season, or is there a nightcap?
That is Illinois or Iowa at Illinois Sunday night at 7.
Interesting. Which if everything breaks, if everyone loses, Illinois could possibly play for a share, right?
Yes, if Michigan State, Maryland, and Wisconsin lose,
yes, Illinois
will be playing for a share in the nightcap,
which would be amazing. Okay, so I know you are all in on Ohio State right now.
To be fair, I was in on Ohio State for a while here. It's not just because they won these recent games. Can you give me a little credit? Fair.
I'll vouch for that.
But,
so you have been all in on Ohio State. I will correct myself. And what are you seeing right now that makes you think that they could possibly go into Breslin, get a win, and then obviously, their long-term prospects of a run in the tournament?
So Ohio State is 9-2 over its last 11, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like the Bart Torvik over the last month, Ohio State is 7th in the country based on how they're playing. The only 2 teams that have been higher over that span are Michigan and Wisconsin in the Big Ten. And Ohio State beat Michigan twice, so Bart might need to recalibrate a bit in his adjusted efficiency margins. I like that this team is playing with 1 point guard instead of juggling between 2. I think DJ Carton is probably the better long-term player, but CJ Walker has turned into a much better player once he's been told, you're the point guard, just go lead the team. Caleb Wesson, this guy I've never really been that high on, and is playing really, really well down the stretch. What probably will be his last year, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
This team spreads the floor, has multiple shooters at different positions, legit pick and pop big. I mean, they have a lot of pieces that you really like. I know they had that bad stretch in January, but other than that 1 month, this team has been really, really good. And I think that they're closer to that team that everyone thought was a top 10 team early in the year than the team that everyone just gave up on in January. That's my quick sell.
Yeah, and I mean, Wesson's been really shooting the ball well. That obviously leads to great spacing, and when you watch their offense, that's what you see. They really spread teams out. They create driving lanes for their guys that can go off the bounce. They
A lot of ball screens.
A lot of ball screens. So you're right. They are. I didn't see any of the Illinois game. Did you?
Saw a bit of it. They were down and came back. Great defense in the second half, and then hit some big shots.
So did they just go single coverage on IO basically, and then just try to shut everyone else down? Because it looks like he just ended up. 8 for 11 on twos. Was he just attacking the basket or what?
I did not watch enough of that game. It was overlap with the Michigan game pretty significantly, so I can't break down that game specifically. EJ Liddell had a big game off the bench, and he's kind of come on here as Kyle Young's been out. I also think that you have to point out that Kyle Young's injury has kind of given Ohio State another way to play. Andre Wesson has played a lot of three this year, but without Kyle Young, they go to kind of a 4-guard look that can be really tough to cover. They have basically Wesson, Washington, Walker, Muhammad all can shoot threes. So you basically have 5 dudes who can shoot threes. It makes you make decisions out of character in the ball screen game, right? Like you have to defend it in different ways to deal with all those threats. Or you just bet on someone who's going to miss and then cheat off him. But I think all those guys are capable of hitting multiple threes in a game, which is tough to cover.
Yeah, they've kind of, in some ways, they've got a little bit of what Wisconsin has going right now, where it's a pretty tight rotation, but all 6 whatever guys can score, can get you on pretty much any night. Like they can attack you in different ways. They can get one guy can get 18 one night, the next night a different guy, next night a different guy. That's why Wisconsin is torching teams right now, and that's exactly what Ohio State's doing.
Yeah, they're the 2 teams that take and make the most threes in the Big Ten. That's
Maryland just takes them.
Yeah, Maryland just takes them. They don't always make them. It's an approach. I don't know. Maryland's hoping for that variance to kick in anytime.
So at the same time, Michigan State has not lost on senior day since 2012. That loss to Ohio State. That was the William Buford, Jared Sullinger, Aaron Kraft team. This is all before me, but that was the loss that somehow gave Michigan a share,
yeah,
right?
It created a 3-way tie. If Michigan State would have won outright, or Michigan State wins that game, they win outright. Instead, Ohio State earned a share, and then Michigan also was in the share.
Okay, gotcha.
So and it came down to basically the last shot.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about this game is that it's the first time these two have met. You know,
you're going to tell me that's great scheduling or some bullshit?
No, I would not say that, but I understand why. You know, just shit happens. But the effect of, you know, Cassius' senior day, and there's going to be a ton of emotion in the building. That usually goes in Michigan State's favor. Like they make it work. So it's a big ask for Ohio State, who is not playing for a share, to go in there and get a win this weekend. What about this matchup, considering it's the first time that we've seen it, do you think could go Ohio State's way enough that they could actually kind of overcome a lot of things that I feel like are going against them?
So I guess if you want to just flip the narrative around, you could say, well, Ohio State has nothing to play for. They're not going to play tight, right? Like you do see situations, and Michigan State does a pretty good job.
Michigan at Maryland theory, I'm sure.
It's the same theory,
about,
yeah.
right?
I mean, it's the same thing. You could flip it for Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin actually has an advantage going to Indiana because Indiana is going to be tight, right? So I think this just the simple narrative is Ohio State's playing really well, going to have nothing to lose. I mean, they're playing for seeding, right? Like this team is going to be a protected seed probably, especially if they were like to win a game like this. Matchup wise, I think it comes down to the ball screens and the threes. Michigan State has given up threes at different points this season as far as volume, and Ohio State will take them. It's a big equalizer if some of those go early. I mean, Michigan learned that the hard way. It's really hard to beat a team that plays good defense if they hit 10, 11, 12 threes in a game, right? So that's the risk you run as far as the game getting away. I don't think Caleb Wesson will want any part of Xavier Tillman inside. Caleb Wesson was basically camped out behind the 3-point line against Michigan the entire game. He's not going inside, but just him on the perimeter stretches your entire defense out. He is a guy you could say could draw a couple early fouls on Tillman. Like the Wesson officiating has been a narrative throughout the season where OSU bitches about it, Maryland bitches about it. It's like a back and forth how he's officiated.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a situation where you get cheap fouls on Tillman and have an advantage. I did notice that in the Illinois game, Kofi got 2 fouls. Underwood auto-benched him for the whole first half, or most of the first half. Holtman put Wesson back in the game with 2 fouls in the first half. Kept Ohio State in the game a bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, like I kind of feel, and it reminds me a little bit of the Michigan game against Ohio State, that like for Ohio State to win on the road against a good team, that like I think you need that. I think you need Wesson scoring down low. Like against Michigan State or against Michigan, he went 6 for 8 down low. He went 3 for 6 outside. I just think it's a really big. If he's not giving you anything easy to go into Breslin and get a win is really, really hard. And you're right. I think Tillman gets locked in on this matchup, basically eliminates him from the picture, and then it's just going to be a bunch of guards shooting threes on the road. And law of averages says that's pretty hard to win a game that way.
Yeah, Ohio State's going to shoot 45% of their shots from 3-point range. Mm-hmm. If they make 10, it's going to be a really close game. If they make 6, probably won't be. That's basically the game. Because I think Ohio State will play well enough. Like I don't think Ohio State's defense is going to allow Michigan State to sort of run out and build up a big lead, right? Like they have a pretty good game control defense as far as great defensive rebounding, stopping transition, stuff like that. So kind of things that I would refer to as like keeping the game in front of you. So they're going to keep it in some sort of striking distance. And if the threes go in, then you're looking at a chance, right?
Recent road games for Ohio State on the road, 6 for 25 at Nebraska, 9 for 30 at Iowa, 6 for 19 at Wisconsin, 7 for 18 at Michigan. There's a reason that
Ohio
teams
State is
do
not
better at home.
There's a reason that Ohio State can sweep Michigan over the last month and be ranked below Michigan on Torvik, because a lot of their magic has come at home over this last stretch. Right. There's no denying that. The good thing is, if you're buying Ohio State stock, is the NCAA tournament is not on the road. So
right, absolutely.
I still think, though, I mean, I wouldn't pick Ohio State in this spot, but I would think that maybe this game gets interesting if they hit a few threes.
Yeah, I think the line will be 5. I would probably take Michigan State.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. And then I guess kind of the bigger picture, if do you going into next week, I mean, we're going to talk about the Big Ten tournament, I guess, early next week. We probably don't need to get into that yet.
What is your take on whether the Big Ten tournament matters?
I don't think it matters that much. Just certain teams, Michigan State being one of them, other teams it means a ton for, right? There's going to be teams that are trying to play their way in. It means a lot for them. But your Michigan State, trying to think of a couple others that I don't think this has really any bearing on where they go or what they do. Like a team like Michigan, I'd like to see go play well. In terms of if I'm going to buy them for the NCAA tournament, I'd like to see them play well in Indy. Just because there's been a little kind of dip in where they've been here with the last 2 losses. I don't think they played particularly well last night. But a team like, say, Ohio State, if it goes and just misses a bunch of threes in a relatively early Big Ten tournament game, I really don't. That won't change my perspective on them at all going into the NCAA tournament. Does all that make sense?
Yeah, I just think Michigan State Twitter just is the most down on the Big Ten tournament as possible.
Oh, well, part of that's Graham. Jesus Christ.
I think Michigan State could benefit from playing well in the Big Ten tournament. I don't know. It's just an odd phenomenon that you could argue there's no tie to tournament success leading to the next week. I also don't think you want to just not play well, right? Like, I don't know. You want to be playing well. It's not like I guess if you're playing, 3 games in 3 days, it could be a lot, but you want to at least play well for a game. Do you agree?
I think best case scenario for Michigan State would be to be the 1 seed, to get Michigan out of an 8-9 game, beat Michigan, so you got something to feel good about, then go lose in the semis, and so you don't have to go and worry about playing on Sunday, be gone, and you got a nice win, you got a little shit talk on your rival, and you go on your way. That's probably the ideal scenario for Michigan State, I think.
Fair enough.
Do you want to hop over to Michigan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Last night was maybe the most mundane game that has been played in that building in 2 months. But obviously it was real nice to see nice senior day moments for Xavier Simpson and John Teskey and John Beeline in the building. I think it was a good thing just so that it was something to get out of the way. Like at some point you want him to be able to come back and be a presence within the program, right? And to kind of get over the first step of having him come in and see a game, I think was a good thing, a cool thing. So there won't be that conversation of, man, when will John Beeline ever come back to Christ? You know what I mean? So that's good. The game itself would be my analysis of that. What do you have? I'm sure you broke it down with a little more nuance than I did.
It reminded me of a bye game in March.
Okay,
It was the second fastest game Michigan played all year. It was just kind of a joke. I mean, Nebraska didn't have Cam Mack because he somehow got suspended 4 times in one season. An impressive accomplishment. So you're playing a team that basically their whole offense is to run high ball screen with Cam Mack, and then they don't have Cam Mack. Not really a surprise when they turned it over 28% of their possessions. Michigan played not great in the first half. Made a few shots in the second half. I mean, you can look at individual things like it's good to see Isaiah Livers finally make a few shots or whatever. But what are you really taking from this game to mean anything over the next month? Nothing. It's just a bunch of bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing that it is, a guy like Isaiah Livers saw some shots go in. You got to win after back-to-back losses. If you say they played a more middle-of-the-pack team in the league that could have beat up, say it was, Indiana, right? Indiana comes into Chrysler and beats them, and suddenly it's a 3-game losing streak. People would be jumping off bridges, right? This at least kind of stemmed any level of panic, and now you go into Maryland, you got a really good test that you really have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So I think where this game fell was very advantageous, I think, for Michigan.
Yeah, I think you would have liked to play better. I don't think anyone played a particularly great game, but I also think Nebraska's sheer ineptitude made it hard to play a coherent, crisp game. Like, I'd rather play. What if you played like Indiana, like a 24-point win over Indiana, who's actually somewhat is going to run a coherent game, and they're not actually that good, but you can beat them. You know what I mean? Like, take something more from that. This game was just a joke, and it seemed like everyone knew that about the first media timeout, and then took turns falling asleep or doing whatever else.
It was just junk ball, and without the Cam Mack show in town, I mean, what's the point?
No celebrations. I hope that's not the last we see of Cam Mack.
I know. Man, we were talking about it last night, you and I, on online, like, disciplined 4 times this year, suspended for this game. I really think he deserves consideration for MVP honors just based on that really impressive showing this year. So,
yes. So I think we should more talk about what sets up for Sunday, and just, I guess, where we think this Michigan team is at, big picture. This is kind of one of those situations where everyone looks through the lens of Michigan lost back-to-back games to two teams that are playing really well, and then wants to forget that the month before that Michigan was playing really well. How do you weight that? How do you decide, well, actually, if you look at the whole month, Michigan's been in a good spot. Like where Michigan is up to 11th in Ken Palm. I think they were only higher than that once all season after Atlantis. So big picture, you look at this team and everything's right there in front of it as far as what it wants to do in the postseason. Not sure where you'd really put your marker down though, right? Like I don't know you bet on it, but they certainly have the potential and ability. They've also shot 30% or worse from three for 5 straight games. Going to need to make some of those to go somewhere.
Yeah, and some of that is probably Isaiah Livers turning a bit of a corner and getting back to the guy that he was. I think some of it is also matchup based, right? I mean, we talked about the Wisconsin and the Ohio State matchups kind of ad nauseum, and how much do you really take away from those losses in terms of them being losses? But you're right. I mean, like the numbers all along have been right on Michigan State, right? So in theory, why wouldn't the numbers all along be right on Michigan? And it's a team that has gradually gotten a lot better. And you're right. I mean, when I looked it up this morning before we started recording, like 11th in Ken Palm, like that tells me something that like my eyes aren't telling me, right? Because like I've watched these recent games and I haven't felt like, man, Michigan really looks like a team that might have some kind of run in it. Whereas 2 weeks earlier, obviously I was like, well, this looks like, hey, man, this might be an Elite Eight team or something. The answer, as always, we say is in the middle, but I don't know. It would be, considering what is seen here, like I find it really interesting that the Ken Palm line for this game is only 3 points. Which when you look at,
seem low to you?
I think like if you were just looking at the matchup, right? Okay, it's the first play. It's a team playing for a share of the Big Ten championship versus a team that's in the 8-9 game. It's a team that has been ranked all year versus a team that dropped out of the rankings. Like you would just, in terms of like the black and white of it, you would say, oh, like Maryland will be, a pretty heady favorite at home in this game. Numbers obviously say otherwise, and I'm sneakily starting to come into Michigan might win this game.
So Michigan's playing significantly better basketball than Maryland right now. Since Maryland won at Michigan State, Maryland is 2-3 with wild wins against Northwestern and Minnesota.
2 of those games are on the road, at Ohio State, at Michigan State.
In that 5-game span, Maryland's Torvik rank 83rd in the country.
Go ahead.
Their defense is 270th in the country over the last 5 games.
Whoa.
So this team has just completely forgotten how to play defense over the last 2 weeks, giving up a point per possession in 5 straight games. Not really against all that great of offenses. Northwestern's in there. Rutgers is in there. I think that we haven't really loved Maryland all along.
Right.
There's a chance Maryland loses this game. They come up. They're going to be a team that outscores Big Ten teams by like 2.5 points per 100 possessions. That's closer to a bubble team than a team you would talk about to win the Big Ten. So teams like Michigan and Ohio State have better overall Big Ten efficiency numbers than Maryland. It is a spot where you would say, yeah, Maryland's going to win at home. But, man, I don't really see it with this team. And I don't love anything about this team going into the postseason. And I know they've had tough spots, right? Like OSU on the road, Michigan State at home. Those are not easy games to win, but I don't really see a lot of upside with this team. For all I know, they come out and score 80 points and win by 20. But I think it's a sneaky spot for Michigan because this Maryland team is just kind of a mess right now.
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty insane for Maryland to win 15 straight games at home this year and then lose the last 2.
How many teams as good as Michigan State and Michigan has Maryland played at home this year.
It's true.
No one, right?
No one even close.
They didn't play
really.
Ohio State. They didn't play. So they played like Iowa, Rutgers, Purdue. Okay.
They didn't play.
They did play Ohio State at home.
They didn't play Illinois. They played Ohio State at home when Ohio State was
A mess.
a total mess. They didn't play Illinois at home, I don't think. No.
They did in December.
Oh, December. There
They won by 59-58.
Yeah, the game was trash. It was another one. Maryland has just flat stolen so many games this year that you're right. I mean, they should have, in theory, it probably should have been flipped where the 2 or 3 games that Michigan State pissed away, it would have won. And the 2 or 3 games Maryland stole, it would have lost. And you would see, Michigan State, like everyone predicted, having won this conference by 2 games.
Yeah. I mean, Michigan State would have basically locked this thing down if it doesn't blow that game against Maryland at home.
Right.
Just put that one. And then add in 3 games that Maryland stole. Maryland's the team I think you want to draw in the Big Ten tournament. Maryland's the team that I think you want to draw in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
This team, I don't see it. And it's going to be one of those situations where it's going to look like they collapsed, but you could make an argument that they overachieved, which people aren't going to want to hear. But you could say they were the most well coached because they won games despite the fact that they're not significantly better than everyone else. And people probably aren't going to love that take, but
no,
and they're going to win more games than their stats say they should have.
And what's funny is so much of this is based on the fact that we watch damn near every Big Ten game. But the funny thing is that when I look at Maryland, if they played in any other league, what would be my passing, uninformed opinion on them? And the first thing that I would look at when it comes to projecting them in the NCAA tournament is I typically, when I don't really know much about a team, if I see that you're top 25 in both offense and defense on Ken Palm, I'm I'm going to probably give you 2 wins. You know what I mean? I feel good about teams like that, just in general. Maryland falls into that category. Barely, but they fall into that category.
What other Big Ten teams fall into that category? Do you know off the top of your head?
I would guess Michigan State.
Yep.
I don't think Michigan's defense is good enough.
No, it's Michigan and Ohio State.
Okay.
Michigan's 23rd. Ohio State's 15th, 17th.
Gotcha.
Maryland is 24th, 22nd, and Michigan State is 12th and 13th. Yeah. So, maybe Maryland's going to show me something here, but I have a hard time getting there right now.
Agreed.
I guess matchup-wise, I think you look at the threes, right? Maryland shoots a ton of threes and is the 288th best three-point shooting team in the country. It's dangerous because sometimes three-point shots go in, and I think that speaks to some of their wild kind of back and forth turns in games and these crazy streaks. But this team just isn't very good at creating open twos either, right? They shoot a lot of guarded threes. It's just all right, we're just going to throw this up here and hope we can go get it on the backboard. They do get to the free throw line a lot. Anthony Cowan is ridiculously good at getting to the free throw line for a 6-foot guard.
Senior day.
I'm sure that'll be emotional for everyone.
It'll probably be Jalen Smith's last home game too. One would hope. But here's the thing. Also, we're just coming off a weekend last week where we were talking about, one of the kryptonites for Michigan is a team that can really stretch you out and play with a shooting 5-man. Maryland's essentially using Jalen Smith the way Michigan used Franz Wagner at times, and
Mo Wagner,
and they're going to put Michigan's defense into uncomfortable spots, especially when John Teske leaves the floor.
So here's the difference: that the guys on the wings, Aaron Wiggins shoots 31% from three.
No doubt.
Eric Ayala shoots 26% from three. So the thing about Wisconsin and Ohio State with the stretch bigs is that you can't really stunt or help off of any of those guys because they're automatic 3-point shooters.
Yeah.
That's not the case with Maryland. I think that speaks to some of their 2-point shooting numbers and how they can't create that pressure on the rim because they don't have enough spacing, right? Like there are ball screen defense, you have to give up something. Well, you're going to give up Eric Ayala shooting 26% from three, and if he beats you, he beats you, right? So that is where that's like the fatal flaw. And I guess like Maryland's offense makes sense, right? 4 out, stretch big, run a bunch of pick and roll, shoot a bunch of threes. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't make them, and that's tough. Anthony Cowan also is a guy who basically only shoots at the rim or from 3-point range, kind of like Xavier Simpson like that. He's not going to go and hit 4 or 5 mid-range pull-ups usually, which Michigan's drop coverage will give up a lot of.
He can at times get to the foul line a shit ton. Sometimes.
Yeah, he's great at that.
Right.
He's got that head snap game going. It's just like built into the Maryland program there. But he also they're a good free throw shooting team. So if you start giving up free throws, they'll beat you. They're not going to Nebraska it.
Yeah, if Michigan is anything resembling the foul trouble it did last weekend, that would spell a quick death probably in this game.
Yep, and I still think it's a spot where this game is a little closer than you might think. And like you say, like people think, oh, Maryland, Big Ten champion, they should be a tier above. I think these two teams are pretty even. Like on a neutral, I would pick Michigan to win this game.
Likewise.
Without a doubt.
Likewise.
That adds to the, I don't know, it's different senior night, whatever else, but it's also a lot of pressure. Especially when you've already lost 3 or 4 going into it, and you know what everyone's going to say, what everyone's going to think. It's not an easy spot.
And Maryland just lost basically in this scenario. You know, playing the Michigan State game, ESPN game day, rowdy, the whole deal, everything, everyone knowing that a possible outright championship still very much in front of them, and instead got their doors blown off by Michigan State and then went and lost at the rack. So where is this team mentally? It's basically the exact opposite of where Michigan State is mentally. It's the exact opposite of where Wisconsin is mentally. So yeah, I agree. It should be interesting, man.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan needs to hit some threes though. Like,
yeah,
we're getting to the point where you can win a couple games shooting 30% from three, but this team to have any ceiling, it's going to need some of those 40% 3-point shooting games. I mean, they shot 43%, I think, from three in November. If they could get 2 weeks like that, you're looking at a different team.
Yeah, and I mean, and also look at it like what has coincided with the poor shooting slump. You missed games you had Eli Brooks miss a game. You had him then play 2 games wearing a Batman mask. And you had Isaiah Livers coming back from an ankle sprain. Like there is a reason here for the shoot. It's not just like everyone's missing shots in bunches. There's kind of a cause there. So my question is, where, especially those two, where are they a week from now in terms of their shooting? Because if they start, if they're making 10, 11 threes in the Big Ten tournament, suddenly the ceiling is right back where it was 2 weeks ago in terms of where people think they could go in the tournament.
Yep.
Especially playing it in empty neutral courts.
Back to the Bahamas stuff.
That's right. And then there's that weird other thing about Michigan on neutral floors. That's
30-5.
Still apparently a thing.
Andrew Kahn corrected me, let me know that my 29-5 stat was wrong because I didn't count the Chaminade game because they were listed as semi-away, and I missed it, and I'm sorry for getting that wrong, but Michigan is 30-5 on neutral floors with Xavier Simpson and John Teskey. Ridiculous stat.
Ridiculous.
That's basically a whole season of neutral court wins. So for whatever reason, this team has some of that energy when they get away from campus sites.
Well, yeah, and they also had the best 36-hour prep head coach probably in the country for most of it, and proved that it still worked this year with 3 wins in the Bahamas.
Yeah, to be fair, they won in the Bahamas. They
Right.
beat Rutgers at the Garden.
Right.
Like, they know how to prepare for those games in a way that I think a lot of teams maybe aren't as experienced, right? Like, how many neutral court games has Rutgers played going into the NCAA tournament or the Big Ten tournament?
Right.
Those guys probably played like 5 in 3 years, right? So that's a difference just in terms of expectations, I think.
These guys know how to win at this time of year. So, and same thing with Michigan State. They just went to the Final Four. So, all right. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening. We will be back early next week with probably 2 episodes where we break down the Big Ten tournament on one, and we'll talk some postseason awards on the other. So look forward to that early next week, and then it's time for the madness, as they say. Dylan, get excited, bud.
Yeah, we'll probably do at least a pod in Indianapolis, right?
Oh well, yeah, but in the immediate upcome, of course we're going to be potting in Indy. You kidding me?
All right, just making sure.
That's what we're here for, man. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening. Subscribe to Hoops. Subscribe to The Athletic. Leave us a review in the iTunes store, and be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.